So my name is Brianne, and I am a marine biologist. I'm the founder and CEO of Nada, which is a package-free grocery store in Vancouver, British Columbia. And we're on a mission to support a more just food system and to inspire people to change the way that they shop for groceries. So when we think of climate change, things like fossil fuel energy usually come to mind first. But what is less conspicuous are the consequences of what are on our plates. So when we look at our food system and look at the emissions from our food system, everything from farming to deforestation to food waste and livestock emissions are contributing to a really large percentage, up to 37% of our total worldwide greenhouse gas emissions. That number is huge, and essentially what that means is that our food system is one of the single largest drivers of climate change. So climate change and our agricultural system are really tightly linked, and that's definitely really important because we're all involved in the food system. So we're in this position right now where the climate is warming. Things like agricultural pests are starting to migrate. Our food system in the next 30 to 50 years will only be able to produce about 50% of the food for the population. That's twice the size. And climate change is affecting food security and food accessibility. So as a brand, that's affecting your raw ingredients and your suppliers and your entire supply chain. So what this means is that if you are a food retailer, a distributor, a buyer, a grower, a processor, or even if you buy, eat, or dispose of food, you're part of this system. And it's something that needs to change pretty soon. So essentially, when we look at our plates, global warming isn't necessarily just in our vehicles, it's on our dinner plates and it's in our grocery baskets. So I've been really lucky to live and work and travel in a lot of places as a marine biologist for the last decade, studying everything from coral reefs to tropical fish and marine mammals. And very quickly, it became very apparent just how closely linked our food system is to the health of our oceans. So I haven't been on a single dive, for example, where I haven't seen some piece of plastic. So I've been diving all around the world. This is a dive site that stands out in particular. It's one of my favorite places. It's one of the top 10 dive sites in the world. It's a tiny little island off the coast of Borneo. It looks like tropical paradise with crystal blue waters, but when you turn the lens of the camera down, this is what you see. So this is actually that dock from where we launched that day. Everything from plastic straws to food wrappers, water bottles, even things like bananas that hadn't been eaten. And this is something that just really stood out to me when I took a closer look at this picture later. It really stuck with me because I realized that a lot of these products were things that I was using myself every single day. And I also started to realize that it didn't matter what sort of species I was studying, whether it was a fish or a marine mammal. Nearly every problem that these species were facing were somehow either directly or indirectly linked to our food system. So that's everything from shipping and underwater noise to agricultural runoff, creating dead zones. And then food waste and plastic pollution, things like marine debris were big problems that I was seeing as well. And I decided that food waste, especially because it's one of the largest contributors to greenhouse gas emissions, and plastic pollution, were things that really, on the big scheme of things, could be relatively easily tackled with individual action. So it was these two problems that I decided I wanted to focus on. And I just wanted to do something about it so much, and it was just such an obvious problem that I decided to open a grocery store, of all things. So that's where Nada comes in. And today I want to share with you a little bit how our brands and how food can be a part of the solution and not part of the problem. And I'd like you to think about how your brand or your company can be a part of the supply chain that is supporting a more just food system. So this is Nada, and we're a package-free grocery store that's in Vancouver. And like I said, we really are working towards a more just food system. And essentially, what we do is relatively simple. It goes kind of back to our roots. We think of how our grandparents used to shop we have a bring your own container model. Essentially how this works is that customers are able to bring in their own containers to refill with food. We try to keep it as accessible as possible, so it does not need to be a pretty container, it does not need to be a mason jar, it does not have to be Instagram pretty. You can reuse a plastic bag that you could have, you can reuse a Ziploc bag, you can use an upcycled or recycled yogurt or spaghetti container, it does not matter. As long as it's clean, you can bring it in and you can refill it with food. And then we have a digital system that actually, like a tech system that we've designed that makes this process of weighing and tagging your containers really fast and efficient. And the biggest advantage of this, there's the obvious benefit of enabling our customers to reduce their packaging waste. But by being able to buy only what they need, our customers can actually reduce a huge amount of food waste. So especially for small families, or if you're a single person buying food for yourself for dinner, you can come into our store, you can buy things like a single egg, you can buy one sprig of cilantro, and you can check out knowing that you don't have to throw out the entire bunch when you get home because you're only making a bowl of guacamole. We also work really hard to source better, so we're looking at every different level of our supply chain and trying to bring transparency to that. And essentially, we work with every single supplier that we have. So we have more than 1,000 SKUs in our store, and every single product that we sell is traditionally a packaged product. So what we're doing is we're having conversations and encouraging brands to think about how they can get products to us package free. So for example, we have a coffee roaster that's 2 blocks away or 2 kilometers away, and they deliver roasted coffee beans to us in a Rubbermaid tote. That tote gets picked up and returned every time. So we have this circular system of container reuse between as many suppliers as we can. So just think, if you start having some conversations around sustainability and packaging with the brands or the companies that you're working with, everyone in your supply chain, just think of the impact that that can have. And overall, this combination of bring your own containers plus better sourcing is allowing us to drastically decrease our packaging and our food waste and our overall carbon footprint. Our retail store has been open for 1.5 years. We're already diverting millions of containers from landfill, and we've sent 0 food to the landfill. So, thanks. That is definitely a number that we are very proud of, because your average grocery store, the average retailer, is wasting between 8 to 12% of their total inventory on food, and we've brought that down to less than 1%. And the last little bits are composted, and then there's nothing that's going to landfill. So, how many of you in this room have heard of the 3 R's? A few of you? Okay, that's good. And has anyone heard of the 5 R's? No, just the 3 people that came with me. So today, I want to share a bit of a framework for you. This is a decision tool that we have at our fingertips that we use with every single business decision that we make. It's super simple. It's something that I hope you can take and run with in your businesses as well. So the first is refuse. So at the top of the pyramid is refuse. So these come before the first 3 R's that you're used to. Refuse essentially means refuse items, refuse things that you don't actually need. So think really critically about what those are, and decide if it's something you actually need. Reduce is to reduce your consumption. So for things that you do actually need, is there a way that you can reduce the amount that is required to get the job done? Reuse and repair goes with this as well. One of the best things that you can do is reuse items that you already have. Recycle is quite obvious, comes towards the bottom, and then rot or compost the rest. Awesome, so leave that up just for a second. So I'm going to walk you through a little bit about how this can look like in your business and in ours as well. So refuse, like I said, is at the top of the pyramid. The idea is to refuse things that you don't need. So for us, one of the first things that we did was refuse to work with suppliers who are not willing to help us reduce waste in our supply chain. This has had a huge number of benefits. First of all, we end up working with some really wonderful humans. It's essentially resulted in just a complete supply chain that's really values aligned. So we work with a lot of really wonderful suppliers. For you, this might look like any wide variety of things. Maybe it's refusing to use a certain type of packaging. Maybe it's refusing a shipment that's coming into your loading bay loaded with packing peanuts. Maybe it's actually choosing to refuse to get on a plane and opting on a video conference instead. It might also mean something as simple as refusing a single-use water bottle or a single-use coffee cup at your next meeting. So you can definitely do this at any stage. It doesn't matter if you're a one-person company or a large company or just someone working within that supply chain. Every small action really does count. So reduce essentially means use less stuff. So this is something that I'm very proud of. This is the build out of our store. So by design, the store is really minimal. This is actually not this empty. We do have more stuff than that. But this was during construction. And the first thing that we decided to use was to reduce our energy consumption. So our building is a LEED certified gold building. And then nearly every single fixture and piece of construction material that we used in the build out of our store is secondhand. So we've really been able to reduce the amount of products that we were purchasing to build out our store. And it's just something that's really amazing and was a lot easier than what you might think. So for example, every piece of wood that you see in this picture, these are our produce boxes, was made out of recycled mattress and box spring boards. For you, again, reducing can come in a lot of ways, shapes and forms. A lot of the examples that I give have to do with packaging. So are there things that you just don't need that you can reduce your consumption of? Reuse is another one. So a great example within our store was when we were building it, we had to take down and move an entire wall. And instead of just demolishing the wall like would happen in any traditional construction project, we actually took the time to deconstruct it. So what we did was we were actually able to salvage the nails and the screws, the insulation and the framing, and we were able to rebuild the entire interior set of walls for our building from what was deconstructed. So the biggest advantage of that is obviously that it saved us thousands of dollars. We were also able to do things like purchase LED lights that were secondhand. They were almost brand new, but just the purchase of those lights saved us $20,000 in our build out. So reuse for any sort of brand or business, you can think really small, you can think really big. If you are a food company, for example, is there a way that you can come up with some sort of reusable container system? Can you work with your retailers to offer refillable options? Can you come up with any sort of packaging like a glass jar that you might be able to offer a deposit on? We work with quite a few brands in our store, everything from ice cream companies to dairy companies and juice and nut milks, a whole bunch of different products that come to us in reusable containers with a deposit. And the biggest advantage of that is that you're actually encouraging customers to come back and purchase that item. So we definitely see a lot of cost savings and a lot of brand loyalty with products that offer jar deposits. Recycle. So recycle is a bit obvious. I think most people do know how to recycle. But with recycling, I definitely encourage you to get creative. So what we've done in our space is actually recycled or repurposed our space. So we have designed all of the fixtures in our, this is a grocery store, we've designed all of the fixtures to be movable. We push them out of the way. And what that enables us to do is host community events within our store. So we're hosting more than 50 events in our store every year, everything from film screenings and panel discussions. We've hosted repair workshops. We even do buy donation community yoga on some mornings with donations going to our 1% for the Planet companies. And what the biggest advantage of this is that it's just enabled us to build this phenomenal community of people that we can tap into for advice and support, product requests. Like, we're really able to push our business ahead because we just have such an open dialogue directly with our customers. And and our customers are definitely willing to pay more for less packaging and to support a more sustainable food system. And when it comes to recycling, the best piece of advice that I can give you is to actually learn about your recycling system. So if you're a business and you're working with a waste hauler, learn what that waste hauler is actually able to recycle. Just because there's a recycling symbol on something does not mean it's recyclable. Those, the numbers on the bottoms of packaging were actually designed for sorting facilities so they could figure out what the type of product is. Just because it's there does not mean it's recyclable. So check with your waste hauler. And even as a consumer, you can do this as well. Every single municipality across the country has a different municipal recycling system. The best thing you can do is to use their waste wizards or their online databases to figure out if a product that you have is actually recyclable. And then lastly is rot or compost, and in our case, we're trying even not to do that. So this is actually the same walls. This is our zero waste cafe. So we're the only completely zero waste cafe in the city in Vancouver, which means we have no single-use cups at all. We have no single-use takeout containers, no single-use straws. And we do have things like a mug library, so people can come in and they can borrow a mug or a container. We encourage our customers to bring in their own cups to reuse. And then we also have a deposit system. So it's really accessible even if you walk in off the street and don't know what we are, what we're about. We have an option for you to purchase both food and coffee to go. And the design of this cafe was actually built into the retail model itself. So by having a cafe, we have a really talented head chef who's actually able to recover almost all of our food waste from the grocery store before it goes bad, and she's turning it into daily harvest soups, smoothies, and salads. So she's catching this food often when it's at the ripest and tastes the best, and she's turning it into things where you don't necessarily know if it has a bruise on it, if it's blended into soup or stew, it still tastes the same, you don't know the difference. And then we're actually even able to take those leftovers, turn them into a retail product that we're then selling from the front of house. So we're just able to close this loop of food waste within our entire store. And like I said, what this has resulted in is essentially zero food going to landfill and the tiniest percentage, less than 1%, going to compost just from things like peels, avocado pits, and things that have happened to end up on the floor. So rot is really important from a food waste perspective, especially as a food brand, or maybe you are a retailer or buyer. I definitely encourage you to think about how you can tackle food waste in your business. So maybe it's something as simple at your next team event or your meeting, encouraging your colleagues or employees to bring reusable containers to take their food home. Maybe you can actually order less, or maybe if you're having a big food event, today is a great example. Can you figure out a way that you can prevent that food from getting to landfill? So maybe it's even teaming up with a local nonprofit, making sure that surplus food is actually ending up in the hands of people who need it most. So I'm just gonna share something that I know you're all thinking about right now. Like, why can't we just recycle our way out of this mess? We have access to recycling and landfill and compost facilities. Why is that not going to work? So the problem is the recycling system is broken. So it's a really complicated industry. And essentially recycling is treated like a commodity. So just like oil or wheat, if there is no end purchaser for that recycling, it means it's going to landfill. So even if you stick it in your blue bin, even if it makes it to the recycling facility, it doesn't mean that that product is getting recycled. At best, recycling also only results in degraded quality materials. It's called downcycling. So every time you recycle a product, the quality depletes, and it ultimately does end up in landfill after those few uses. And then lastly, we're really lucky in North America to live in a place where we have the infrastructure to deal with waste. It's often out of sight, out of mind. We don't need to think about it. But the reality is that only 9% of all plastic that has ever been produced since it was first commercially available in the 1950s has been recycled. So that means that the remaining 91% has made its way into our natural environment, into the air, into the oceans, where it's breaking down into microplastics. This is something that I've studied on the biology side. These bits of plastic are so small, they're often mistaken by animals as food. They get eaten and enter our food supply chain and ultimately end up on our plates. So I'd like you to imagine for a second a food system where every single stakeholder in the food system is using an approach like this. What would that look like? This is actually a really amazing regenerative farm that's right here in California. They have extremely cute animals, but the reality is farms and food companies like this are actually really resilient to climate change. So a great example, this farm had a really big flooding event 2 years ago, and every single industrial farm that surrounded them had all of their topsoil washed away in one day. This regenerative farm actually thrived because all of their intercrops between their orchards were able to absorb a huge amount of water, and they actually flourished. So just think a minute about that and what this could look like. A food system that's supporting the health of people and planet, a food system that's relying on things like regenerative agriculture, sustainable transportation, and biodiverse ecosystems. It's definitely something that's possible, and it's definitely something we need to move the needle on quite a bit faster. And the reality is this conversation is not new. Consumers are starting to ask for things like this. And if we look back to the climate marches that we saw in September as any indication of what's to come, we're already in a position where businesses need to catch up. Like Molly was saying earlier, especially when we look to the younger generation of consumers, they are really starting to dive into their supply chains. They want to be connected to their food. They want to know where food is coming from. And they're willing to pay more money from brands that they actually trust. So acting on climate and acting on sustainability is a huge opportunity as a brand to start to make a difference and get ahead of this curve. So as a stakeholder in this system, you can decide to do quite a few things to start moving the needle. You can decide to use your purchasing power to opt for more sustainable options. You can decide to source better and bring more transparency to your supply chains. You can decide to save a whole lot of money and waste less. You can also decide to educate your customers and to bring conversations like this to light. You can also decide to trust that this process will have a positive impact for your business like it's having for ours. And I just wanted to leave by letting you know that if you think that you are too small to have an impact, you've definitely never slept in a tent with a mosquito. Things like this can be enacted at any different level in the supply chain. It doesn't matter if you want to bring sustainability, the sustainability conversations to your role or your job. You could be the CEO of a company and deciding on some critical partnerships that you're trying to bring to light. But every single person in the supply chain can make a really large impact. And we know that climate change now is on our dinner plates. And what we can actually do is think about the series of decisions in terms of how that food is getting to our plates. So what's it going to be? Thank you. Thank you.